Well, welcome everybody. I'm Chair of Clackamas County Commission, Tootie Smith. We'll have our panel introduce themselves. Bill, go ahead.
My name is Bill Stewart. I'm a Deputy District Attorney with the Clackamas County DA's office.
Fahid.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Vahid Brown. I am the Housing Services Manager at Health, Housing, and Human Services for Clackamas County.
Thank you. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Adam Brown. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director for Clackamas County's Health, Housing, and Human Services.
And we do expect Lieutenant Mendoza to join us from the Sheriff's Office. He isn't here yet, but he will be shortly. So I'll just go ahead and kick this off.
Chair, if I can interrupt, since this is my meeting, I'd like to see a couple of things before we get started, if we could, please.
I apologize for that, Mike. Go right ahead. I thought you just wanted an introduction.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. For those who aren't aware of what a community planning organization is, if you are in a city, if you live in a city in Clackamas County, it's the city that represents your interest to the county commission. If you don't live in the city, you live in an unincorporated area, that makes you part of a community planning organization, a CPO. And I am chair of our local CPO. We meet 3 times a year. Please join us. Lots of good information, way to learn things and to provide feedback to the county about different initiatives the county is involved with. After this meeting, Claire is going to send out an email, perhaps tomorrow or the next day. Thank you for joining, providing additional ways that you can provide feedback from this meeting, as well as giving you the opportunity to sign up to be on our email distribution list. So thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. And Chair Smith, thank you for letting me interrupt you.
You know, I guess I missed the memo, but thank you very much. You know what? You can interrupt whenever you want on this. I also want to acknowledge a few electeds that I know noticed that were in the queue. I believe Happy Valley Mayor Tom Ellis is here, Clackamas County Commissioner Ben West, and I understand Paul Savas. Paul, I'm looking for your name. If you're here, I welcome that. I welcome the commissioners opining of the information they may have on the questions that come forward. Well, something that's not new that I'll say is that there's a homeless problem in Clackamas County, and the Board of County Commissioners have been trying to figure out what to do about it for as long as I've been on the commission. The homeless situation is not one that I embrace with open arms, to be honest with you. When I came on as chair in January of 21, I didn't want to have to deal with it. I didn't think maybe it was that big of a problem, although I knew homeless had always been with us. However, as time went on through the pandemic, and with the economy the way that it's going, that population in Clackamas County has absolutely blossomed on us, and not in a good way. Some folks say Portland is to blame. We're getting people from Portland, Multnomah County. That's a possibility. But I will say Clackamas County does have their homegrown homeless population as well. There has been some things that Clackamas County really has not wanted to participate in. Metro passed a special services homeless measure on high income earners in Clackamas County. It is a tax to pay for that. Clackamas County voted no on that. However, the other 2 counties voted yes. So we came into the homeless services measure kind of, you know, kicking and screaming, but nevertheless, we had to participate. We did not have a choice in that. Previous to that, Metro passed a housing bond about a year or 2 before that, that put money out to build affordable housing, also can work on homeless housing and a variety of other things, other types of housing. Additionally, we had the Oregon legislature step up to the plate the spring of, I believe, 21, Vahid, with Project Turnkey. And the commission had considered 2 different properties in neighborhoods. The folks didn't want them. And frankly, the commission was not really ready at that time to go forward. We says, fine, we just won't do it. We can't do the due diligence. We can't do the outreach to communities and take the time to educate them on what was necessary. Since then, the legislature came up with Project Turnkey 2.0, of which we are considering funding for this. And it is a situation where the funding will be expiring soon unless we take advantage of it. We have considered many, many hotels in Clackamas County. We considered hotels that were for sale. We needed a willing seller to make a business arrangement with. And we have looked in different cities. We respected the needs of the cities. We have had a couple cities that want to participate in it, but they didn't have a hotel within their jurisdiction. So that kind of left our hands tied. We have landed on this particular property, the Quality Inn, mainly because it's a 110 room facility and it will last as far as we can see at this point. We do have other homeless opportunities. We just opened Tukwila Springs this summer in Gladstone. We have Melhurst Commons. We also have the Vets Village in an industrial area. And when that first opened, it's little pods of about 20 very small individual housing with a common area that you go into for your showers, laundry, and eating facilities. And frankly, the business community in that area was up in arms about it. However, now that it's been running for several years, they realize they don't even notice it's there. And we will be proceeding with Vets Village 2.0 because we're in the process of acquiring land right next to it from another county department and going forward with that. So we're trying to think outside the box on what to do with the homeless situation in Clackamas County. Governor-elect Tina Kotek just gave her state of the state message, and in that, I just read today, she says, I'm declaring a state of emergency for homeless situations in the state of Oregon, and she's going to ask the legislature for 130 million additional. I want Clackamas County to be able to chart our own path on this homeless situation. That's why I believe, and the board believes, that time is of the essence. We do not want to be dictated to by the state of Oregon how to solve our homeless situation. We want to be our own sovereign government with our own values and our own rules and our own way of doing things on this. We've had this discussion many times trying to do outreach to the communities and to the people in there. And I've said many times that there is, when we look at people and we're bringing them off the street into a transitional housing facility, such as what the potential of the Quality Inn could be, we look at causation and then we look at accountability. Causation is, how did you become homeless? We immediately evaluate them. Did you lose your job? Do you have an addiction problem? Do you have a mental health problem? And immediately they go into a program. And the accountability piece is that you get to be in this program and you get housing and you get clean clothes and you get medical attention, you get this. And the accountability piece is you're in a program where you get clean, where we get you in a job if that's the problem. A lot of these people don't have identification. They don't have a driver's license. Maybe they need skills. They need to get re-educated a little bit and into a job. And that's the accountability piece. This is only the beginning of their journey onto prosperity. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel here. I see Lieutenant Marcus Mendoza. He has come on. And Claire, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in to explain the format of the question and answer format. So thank you so much, Chair Smith. Thank you, President Mike Sebula, for welcoming this group here. I'm also from the county, and there have already been some questions about what the format will be. This is a webinar. At any time when you hear the panelists speaking, you are welcome to type your questions into the Q&A section. When you type your questions, we'd really appreciate it if you could include your affiliation, your business, or which area you are a resident of. And then it's wonderful to see almost 70 participants. If we don't have time for everybody, we're very sorry for that, but I will be calling on people in order and possibly grouping together similar questions and presenting those to the panel. And if you feel that you didn't have enough time to address your questions, we will be continuing this conversation. I will be available phone and email. And so this is just the start of the conversation in this hour that we have here. So thank you, and I'll pass it over to Vahid Brown.
Thanks, Claire, and thanks, Chair. Again, I'm Vahid. I'm the Housing Services Manager at Clackamas County. I want to talk a little bit about Project Turnkey and where it fits in our homelessness response efforts here in the community. The chair referred to our values, the Clackamas County's values, and the previous board last year affirmed a series of values with respect to housing and sheltering for Clackamas County. The first of which is that we're working to make homelessness rare, brief, and not recurring. That's a value of our county. That's a goal we're working towards. We want homelessness to not occur very often, that when it does happen, that people are not homeless for a long period of time, and that when we're able to work with folks and help them resolve their homelessness, they don't return to homelessness. So that's the big picture of where we're headed, and how we're doing that is by developing a robust continuum of programs and services to meet people where they are in the community who are experiencing homelessness through street outreach, to provide them a safe place off of the streets, to stabilize, to connect with us, to connect with programming and safety off the streets like transitional housing programs, including using motels, and then to move them into permanent housing with housing navigation, rent assistance, and wraparound supportive services, many of which that Chair Smith touched on: addiction and recovery services, physical and behavioral health services, employment reentry services, and just case management to help people be successful in their housing. That's the continuum that we need in order to realize that value, that homelessness is rare, brief, and not recurring. Historically, Clackamas County has not had that robust continuum. We've had many gaps in those programs and services that I described. We historically did not have direct street outreach programs in previous years, mostly due to underfunding, to chronic underfunding in these programs at the federal level. We did not have safety off the streets programs for most people experiencing homelessness in the community. If you were living in a car or in a tent in the woods, there was nowhere for you to go or at any time of the year to find safety, to access hygiene facilities, to get a shower, to connect with permanent housing. We did have programs in the past for people fleeing domestic violence and some small programs for families with children, but not until the last 2 years. Prior to the last 2 years, Clackamas County had a gap in that continuum there as well. We didn't have outreach, we do now. We didn't have safety off the streets for people around the year, we do now. We didn't have a lot of permanent housing options. In a typical year, prior to COVID, we would see tens of placements in a year into permanent supportive housing. Now, with the new resources that Chair Smith talked about, the bond, the affordable housing bond, especially the supportive housing services measure, we are placing hundreds of people a year into permanent supportive housing. So this is a sea change that we're experiencing in the county. But we still have gaps, and there's still, some conditions that could be fairly characterized as an emergency. A couple of weeks ago, the county and the chair and I and others in this call, on the longest night of the year, December 21st, we held a candlelight vigil for people who have passed away in our community while experiencing homelessness. And we remembered 39 names at that meeting, which is far too many people dying on the streets in our community. So we need a robust continuum to achieve that value. Project Turnkey fits in that continuum as an opportunity with state funding to develop permanent built infrastructure in that critical piece of safety off the streets. We, for the last 2 years, have been doing this. We have been operating transitional housing in motels, beginning with COVID as a response to COVID, using federal funding that many communities in the United States used in this way to provide non-congregate shelter for people experiencing homelessness. Because of COVID, we couldn't operate the way we used to. So we have, for the last couple of years, been operating at its height in COVID. We had 130 rooms being used for this purpose. And early in that work, we developed, largely from the initiative of Bill Stewart, a strong partnership between us, the housing and the human services folks at the county, and our law enforcement partners to identify and address community livability concerns related to those programs. And I'm going to ask Bill and Lieutenant Mendoza in a minute about that partnership. But Turnkey has been has really kind of been something that has changed the landscape of emergency housing in the state. Chair Smith mentioned the first round of Turnkey last year. 13 counties received funding from the state, building 19 projects, 865 emergency housing units. It was a 20% increase for the state in 7 months. So this is an opportunity for Clackamas County to benefit from that program and to have a permanent resource, a permanent asset in our continuum of responding to homelessness in our community. So as I mentioned, for 2 years now, we've been operating transitional housing in motels, using COVID dollars initially, federal dollars to respond to COVID, renting rooms either night by night or with a contract to rent a block of rooms or an entire hotel in one case. And I mentioned this partnership that we developed early on with our law enforcement partners to make sure that the community, insofar it's impacted by these programs, we're able to respond and address those issues proactively. So Deputy District Attorney Bill Stewart, I wonder if I could turn to you for a little bit of background on that partnership.
Certainly, Vahid. When the motel program started, we received some reports of concerns about calls to the sheriff's office for service related potentially to those facilities. So what we did after some research was decide to try to bring everybody to the table who's involved in that. So we meet on a monthly basis. We get a report from the sheriff about the calls tied to each involved motel. And then we have to go in and figure out, are these calls tied to people who are participating in the motel program or something else? Because not everybody in these motels is a participant. And then what we do is we problem solve. We try to figure out a way to reduce the impact on the community so that we're not interfering with the quality of life in that area. And then we work with our partners to accomplish that. In some cases, that means people get moved to different units. Some cases, it means they're no longer able to participate in the program because of their behavior. But usually we're able to bring in other resources, whether it's mental health or otherwise, to help address the problems and reduce it.
Bill, this is Mike Zabula, if I can interrupt you for just a moment. So could you take this one step further? How would this work in this location? Would businesses be able to provide feedback? And how would the residents and the businesses see a positive result?
Great question, Mike. I mean, first of all, obviously this is going to be of a very high priority for the law enforcement side, the DA side. So we're going to be wanting to watch this very closely. We may end up setting up a special meeting just for this so we can focus on the issues here. And then what that would mean is we'd also have to meet with the community and have an ongoing level of communication. I suspect Claire and Vahid will want to talk about that, but we'll take any of that feedback and sit down and try to address the issues. So for instance, you might have a concern, well, if you're going to put homeless folks in this unit, aren't you going to have people in tents or in RVs parked right outside? And the answer to that is no, we're not going to allow that. I mean, we will enforce the laws that stop that in terms of the tent area right around it, as well as if there's problems in it. I mean, it's an important thing for us to make sure that this facility is a very good neighbor in the community, and we're going to be part of that effort. In terms of the specific answer to your question about what sort of form will there be for that feedback, I don't know, Mike. That's probably not in my area of expertise. I will tell you this. I'm happy to participate and we look forward to it so that we can actually address the specific issues that are coming up.
I'm just going to add a little bit to that. Deputy DA Bill Stewart, he and I sit on actually several different panels or groups together dealing with just issues around the county. And my hat's off to him because he does a fantastic job facilitating those and really getting groups to work together to solve these problems. So, you know, if there are issues at this facility or any facility, law enforcement is going to be aware of because we're going to get called to them. And we can go into this more later, but law enforcement will address the issue, and like we've always done in the past, and a lot of this is really moving things on. But it's the community contact and that cooperation, working with the businesses in the area, the residents in the area, working with the DA's office, working with Vahid and the county on how to solve the problems. That's really where that cooperation comes into play for actually solving problems instead of just moving it on. So, like I said, Bill and I have a kind of a long history with working together on things like that, and I see this being one of the same.
Thank you both. I want to just ask a follow-up question to Deputy District Attorney Bill Stewart as well. In addition to kind of the work that we've done as a partnership to address kind of community livability concerns in a proactive way in response to, so there's maybe an issue, we need to get on it and get ahead of it. There's also just been that, in the past, there's not been transitional housing for people experiencing homelessness in the community. And you as a community prosecutor have seen and interacted in a prosecutorial, position with these folks for a long time. And in our conversations, you've reflected to me that you've seen a difference in terms of community livability overall in the availability of these resources when there's a place for someone to go rather than be out in the community experiencing homelessness with all their issues and problems in some cases. Can you speak a little bit about that impact?
Certainly. Thanks, Vahid. I've been a DA for 20 years in Clackamas County. I've been a community prosecutor for 15. And a large part of my job is addressing the impacts of homelessness on our communities in Clackamas County. And up until about 2 years ago, a lot of what I did was prosecute people for trespass, for littering, for disorderly conduct, for misdemeanor theft. And I'm proud of what we do and proud of what I've done there. In some cases, we're simply just pushing the problem from point A to point B, then to point C. We weren't necessarily addressing the problem. In the last 2 years, we've seen a sea change in terms of our impact on that population. And I would argue that the approach that we've adopted in the last 2 years is the most cost-efficient way I have seen to address quality of life and public safety as it relates to some of the impacts from homelessness. What I mean specifically about that is we've been able to, with our true outreach programs, and I can't overemphasize the importance of these things. In the last 2 years, we've developed the capability, I should say the county has developed the capability to go out and actually connect and meet with these people. When somebody in the homeless community sees me, I've been making their life miserable for 20 years. They really don't want to hear what I have to say. They don't have any trust in me. But when we have people who actually go out on the street and work with these folks, walk with them and stay with them, that's incredibly hard. But we've got folks in our LEAD program, that's a county program. We've got great people on our nonprofits that we work with every day, Love One, Father's Heart, Clackamas Service Center, who develop that trust. And then now you tie it in with COVID. For the first time, we've had transitional housing for single adults. When we started this, if I saw 10 to 15 people a year who were chronically homeless get off the streets, I always thought, oh, that's a pretty good year. Now we're in the hundreds of getting these folks off the street in the last 2 years. And we've had people housed that I personally prosecuted 15 times. And again, proud of what I do, but I wasn't making the community any safer. I was kind of just warehousing somebody for a short amount of time. If we can get them in housing and address some of the issues around their challenges, we make a huge impact on public safety. And that's what we've had a chance here to do. And I think the transitional housing piece is incredibly important to being successful in that.
I think that's the panel's presentation. Maybe we should turn to the questions.
Yes, thank you all. I am seeing your questions start to come through. We're going to start with questions from CPO President Mike Sebula. And after him, we will move on I'm starting in order, so we will, Leland James will be next.
Thank you so much, Claire. I want to pass on questions that I've been hearing in the community since this meeting was announced. I appreciate the specific addressing of crime and the magnet nature, not a magnet nature, of a transition facility. That was very interesting. I'd like to propose that whatever it is that's developed in relation to crime and the transition center and the community, that it be developed in a proactive manner that we understand what the process is in advance for providing feedback, for providing communication, rather than a reactive manner. That's one. Two other points that I've been hearing. Food. How will the people in the transition housing eat? And secondly, there will be people in the transition housing that will have children. How will the children get education? And with that, I'll say thank you.
Adam, would you like to take a shot at that?
Yeah, Chair, I'll take a shot at the first question there about kind of, I think, Mike, one of the questions about the feedback loop, right? And our responsiveness to community concerns. So I think we recognize that in order for this project to be successful, both in the short term and in the long term, that's going to be a function of our responsiveness to the community concerns. Certainly the nearby businesses, families, folks living in that community, we have to be receptive to concerns and responsive to them. So you have the county's commitment as we develop the programming for the site, and as we select a service provider to operate the site, to be walking with you every step of the way to make sure that community concerns are met. We're really confident that, you know, a lot of the livability concerns that we've heard from folks to this point, they exist in our community today, right? And so we see this, as you've heard from Vahid and DA Stewart and Lieutenant Mendoza, that they think this is important infrastructure to actually address livability concerns that exist today and help provide people a path out of homelessness, to address the drivers of the livability concerns. So we're committed to working with you and being responsive to your concerns. We've heard calls for a good neighbor agreement from, you know, Ruth Adkins raised that first from Kaiser, and that's certainly something that we're entertaining. We responded right away. Let's meet with Kaiser. Let's talk about the concerns. Let's work on forging this relationship, because that's going to be critical to our success. In terms of food and other access, Vahid, do you want to talk a little bit about how our service providers support people at the sites?
Sure. So with respect to food, I mean, in our current motel-based transitional housing programs, our service providers do provide food to folks that are participating in the program, staying in the hotels. The rooms in the property that we're currently looking at do have, you know, like hotel rooms that we're all familiar with. They have, you know, fridges and some opportunities for kind of a kitchenette sort of thing, a hot plate, a microwave, that kind of thing. So there is opportunities for some food preparation and refrigeration in each room. But our provider does see to the provision of food for participants in the program. Some folks have physical health issues and mobility issues that coming and going is not really you know, on the cards for them, and so providing those resources where they are is important. Children who are staying in our transitional housing programs absolutely go to school, and we work very closely with our homeless school liaisons to identify, you know, the school district that is supposed to serve them by law, and the school districts by law have to make accommodations for the transportation of those kids to their school. A school bus goes regularly up to one of our hotels that we rent right now for one component of our transitional housing response. I've been there meeting with the providers, and I've seen the cool little bus come up on the parking lot and pick up the kids from the program. So we definitely will maintain those connections to their education.
So the first question comes from Leland James, who is the owner of the Office Depot property behind the Quality Inn. Leland, I'm going to give you 2 minutes for your question. I hope that's all right. You're on. You.
Are you? You have me. You have to excuse me for my ignorance in using Zoom. Can you hear me? You can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Well, real quick, I'm gonna Deputy Mr. Stewart. The property faces on the right of way for 215 or 205. Excuse me. And there's a big swath of vacant land there, which can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah. there's about an acre there. I have been sleeping at the motel for 30 years. 2 weeks a year, I go to that motel and I work on clearing that land with the line trimmers, cutting trees, doing the Himalaya berry brush, keeping that down. There's about an acre and a half up there, which has been the homeless area for 30 years.
Hmm.
And the reason I've been doing this is in order to keep the homeless problem down. So just to know, and for Mr. Brown there, I've slept in 1 year in that motel in the last 30 years. Kitchen facilities, they have a kitchen. It'd be nice if you could have everybody meet down. It's not big enough for 110 people, but you could have scheduling or something like that. I'm trying to work with you. I'm a capitalist. I believe in what we're doing, but the question that came up, and Clara brought this to me, and that's where the question comes to now. You have a private business, viable, successful private business, and the government comes in and bails them out or buys them out. And now you have a government business there. Do you pay real estate taxes? Nobody can answer.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I heard all the questions. Number one, if it's a county-owned facility, no, there are not taxes paid on this. Regarding the acre and a half, Mr. James, that you've been clearing, maybe one of the Adam or Vahid can answer that question.
Well, I would say that you know, as part of our property search for a project turnkey property, the owner of this property approached the county with an offer to sell the property to the county. So that was the business owner's you know, choice was to reach out to us and to make that offer. You know, that right of way land adjacent to 205 is maintained or not by the Oregon Department of Transportation. So that is a department that we have a relationship with and that we work with respect to issues surrounding homelessness. So that's something that we can flag, but that isn't property that's under the jurisdiction of the county.
Go ahead.
Mr. James, can I reach you through Office Depot?
I have their contact information.
I would like to meet with you and walk that property, and we'll come up with some strategies to address it. We do have partnerships on some other issues related to homelessness with ODOT, so we can put plans in place to make sure we're not having a lot of people camp there.
Thank you. For now, while we still have time, I'll just go in order. And then when we start to run out of time, I might start grouping similar questions together. So for the next question was from Story Long, and I will unmute you to read your question out loud, Story.
Unmute. There we go. Sorry. Hi, my name's Story, and I live about 5 minutes away from this property under discussion. I want to thank all of you for hosting this and answering these questions. And you kind of started to answer one already while you were answering another question. So my understanding of these kind of transitional housing, why they're so important, is that they can allow people to, from a place of stability, re-engage in their community, re-engage with resources that address the trauma and the issues that can make it chronic houselessness and all that comes with that. And that whenever these projects come with the services like Turnkey is, that they're especially effective. And one of the ways you answered the question while you're talking was the question about schools, where I would imagine that kids who can go to school from a stable place like a hotel are more likely to go to school than if they're living out of their car. So, but if you could just say a little bit more, my question was about how this positively impacts the health of a whole community, not just those who are being housed through the program. And that was one example you gave with the schooling, but I'm wondering if there's anything else that we can see is that this is a net gain for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Story. I appreciate that. I think that there's a lot of ways to answer that question, but there's a lot of questions, so I'm going to try to be brief.
Sorry.
It's a great question. I mean, there's kind of like the harm reduction to the community part of the answer, and there's the really kind of just wholly positive part of the answer. I mean, in terms of the when someone is experiencing unsheltered homelessness, I mean, then that has costs to the community at large. If they're in, well, it's really bad for your health to be homeless, and so folks who are experiencing homelessness make much higher utilization of like the emergency room than we do. It's very difficult to maintain connected to your primary care doctor, your ongoing preventive care, if you're living out of a car. And so there are costs across the community that we incur by letting people be unsheltered and not addressing that issue. We talked about livability concerns. Folks that are in a desperate situation, maybe committing some crimes like offensive littering, trespassing, also some things that are related to just acute poverty and desperation. We remove that issue in our community when we house folks. That's part of the solution that reduces that harm. But there's also, people experiencing homelessness in our community are our neighbors. They're people, they're part of our community. They have things to offer this community. And when we don't invest in stabilizing and providing the resources that folks need to thrive, we lose out as a whole on the contributions that they could be making to our community because they're just suffering outside. Deputy District Attorney talked about people that have been prosecuted over and over again, and now they're housed. I'm not going to say her last name, but Maria, you know who I'm talking about. Someone that fits that description, who's been through the criminal justice system constantly over the last 15 years. She's housed now. She's a peer support mentor. She just got her certification last week. She's giving back. She has gifts to offer the community. And that's something that was not possible when she was struggling out there on the street.
Thank you. I'll go to the next question or comment, which is from Ruth Adkins, who is here from Kaiser Permanente. And I will unmute you, Ruth.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate this. Just here from Kaiser Permanente to voice our support for this project. I put in the Q&A, really appreciate the county's openness to establishing a good neighbor agreement. And I think it would be great to have the CPO, have Mike and the leadership of the CPO join that along with other stakeholders so we could work together on just that line of communication and mutual understanding. And if I could cede some of my time, Dr. Mandrill Taylor is also in the audience, one of our physician leaders. Would love to have him speak to the value we see in this project. Thank you so much.
All right, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Dr. Mandrill Taylor, I'm a Clackamas County resident. I'm also currently serving as the co-chair for the Portland Metro Supportive Housing Measure Oversight Committee. This is actually my first CPO meeting, and it's a very positive energy here, and I just felt it really very welcoming. I just look forward to the continued county support and supportive housing programs and the wraparound services, and I've just appreciated everybody's input, their point of view, and there's just a lot of education that was brought about the initiative so far. So, but like Bruce said, I really feel there's a lot of potential that could happen here with the with Project Turnkey, and I think success really depends on everyone's ability to work together cooperatively with this, and I just feel like there's a lot of potential for growth and in this project.
Any responses to that, Fahid or Adam or Smith or others?
Thank you, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for your support on this. We look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you.
And yes, of course, the CPO would love to be involved with Kaiser and of course also ongoing with the county.
Our next question comes from Debbie Stromberg. This is a good question. It's kind of unique from some of the other ones. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hello, and thank you all for your good work and your good explanations. I am a member of Creator Lutheran Church just down the road on Sunnyside to the proposed location. We have, along with several of the other churches in the Milwaukee, Happy Valley, Clackamas area, have started trying to cobble together a little bit of rent relief funds because we are in partnership with the school district in many cases, sometimes with particular schools, Lot Whitcomb being one of them that is close to the town center area and has a lot of students that are in families that are on the verge of eviction. So we have really been interested and focused on this subject and worried about the kids who do end up being evicted, and I'm really grateful for all of the good work that you are doing. We are particularly pleased with this location. It's very central for churches to be involved. And I guess that's where I sort of have a question for you. We have, Creator at least has been going weekly down to Veterans Village and providing meals. We pick up ideas, you know, like they love having fresh milk. So we do milk collection. We bring cookies occasionally. You know, there's all kinds of partnerships that we have found to support the Veterans Village. So kind of just curious about the possibilities for supporting at this location for transitional housing. Will that look different? What are our opportunities as people of faith in the surrounding area?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Debbie. And yes, please, I'd say let's start a conversation with Creator Lutheran and the other churches that are part of your network. We appreciate the work that you and your congregation do at the Veterans Villages. The Veterans Village experience is so positive for the veterans that reside there because of the community love and support that is brought there kind of organically, and so I would support that. What that will look like and what services will be a good fit for this is something that I'm happy to talk about. And I'm also would love to know how we can support the efforts that you all are doing with respect to rent relief for families with school-age children. We also have access to those resources. So let's see if we can join forces in that. Claire, maybe you can help connect Debbie and I.
Happy to do that. Our next question is from Brian Foster, and I'm still going in order. I appreciate, Brian, that you put your affiliation, that you're a homeowner in the Eagles Landing area. That's helpful for the panel to understand, and I'm going to unmute you, Brian Foster.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, thanks for calling on me. Just quick two questions I had. One was about the requirements for people to access the facility. Is it kind of an application basis, or is it kind of more of a open door policy where kind of anybody that needs help can attend the facility? And then my second question is just estimated or proposed date for this transition of the hotel to happen there off Sunnyside, if you know that, I guess. And thank you for calling on me.
Thanks, Brian. I can take the first question. Adam, do you want to talk about timeline? Great. So that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that, Brian, because I think a lot of people, when they think about transitional housing or safety off the streets, they might think of like Burnside, right? I mean, a place where there's a lot of people lined up outside of the door of a mission waiting to get in. This is not that. None of our transitional housing programs in Clackamas County operate on that model where someone just kind of shows up looking for services. Everyone that we serve in our safety off the streets programs is assessed through our coordinated entry system and is referred. There's a an intake assessment as well. So the provider also does a one-on-one intake with the folks we're referring them to that program. So it's not a come as you are and show up at the door. Veterans Village doesn't operate that way. None of our motel-based transitional housing operates that way. We have a dynamic process where people are assessed based on their needs. And weekly, my staff meet every week. We look at the list of people in our community who are experiencing homelessness. We prioritize that list by vulnerability, and we match those people with available programs and resources, including safety off the streets. So we would use that process to identify the folks who would be best served by a turnkey project, refer them to the service providers who do an intake assessment as well, and then they would be admitted into the program. Adam, do you want to talk about timeline?
Yeah, Brian, so thanks for the question about the timeline. I know folks will definitely want to know what to expect. So we entered into the purchase and sale agreement on this property right around the middle of December. That agreement has a 75-day due diligence period, right? Standard due diligence, appraisal, site inspection, environmental review, all of that. That period is set for 75 days. Then the agreement has us closing 30 days after the conclusion of due diligence. So if you do the math on that timeline, we're about 100 days from mid-December, so closing would be sometime towards the end of March, right, with the approval of the Board of Commissioners. So then we've got a few months of program planning with our service provider. There's going to be things we need to do at that site, like decommissioning the swimming pool, possibly doing some modest renovations to make it suitable for programmatic use, erecting an exterior fence to physically secure the site, a number of other things. So it could be a few more months for us to carry out that work. The earliest I could envision us having folks in that site would be sometime around July 1st. And even then, that would be pretty ambitious, right? This is a big undertaking. Our service providers would need to staff up and all of that. But then we would see a gradual opening of the site so that we're setting people up for success, right? You're not going to, there's 110 rooms in that motel. You're not going to fill them all overnight. That wouldn't be wise, right? So we would be looking for some sort of graduated process of bringing folks online, getting them assimilated to that site. So I think, like I said, earliest would be July 1st. I think that's a little bit ambitious. And then over successive months, we would be filling the site.
Thank you. I have a number of questions here about how this location would be run on a day-to-day, managed on a day-to-day basis. So this is coming from a number of people. What is the screening criteria? How would people be allowed to live here? What about visitors? Who would the service provider be? Are they allowed to have overnight visitors? What about services, employment? Can you talk a little bit more about how it will be run? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and within the timeline that Adam outlined, within that timeline, we would be doing a procurement effort or an allocation effort to identify and fund the agency or agencies providing the services. We don't have that agreement today because we don't own the property yet. But in terms of who it might be, there are a number of expert providers of this service in our community who have been doing it for a long time, including agencies that have been supporting our motel-based transitional housing program in the last 2 years. Some of these agencies have been cornerstone agencies in addressing the housing crisis in our county for decades. Northwest Housing Alternatives operates programs like this, Clackamas Women's Services, the Father's Heart Street Ministry, and on and on. So there's a lot of agencies in the community that we have good relationships with community-based organizations. This is not something we're going to need to, look far and wide to find partners. I talked a little bit about how folks are identified who would be admitted into the program. We use a coordinated entry system called Coordinated Housing Access. We weekly go over that list. The whole team of people, including our community providers, our outreach partners, like Deputy District Attorney Bill Stewart talked about, they come to that weekly meeting. Every safety off the streets provider comes to that weekly meeting. People who know the folks that we're working with, and we prioritize them by vulnerability. So there are folks who are very sick and they need to get off the street. Programming is pretty rich. I mean, there's a lot of one-on-one staff to participant interaction. That's called case management. That looks like working directly with a household to identify what are your barriers to becoming permanently housed. We don't want you to have to stay in this hotel room any longer than is necessary. As soon as we're able to move you into permanent housing, that's the goal. So Chair Smith talked about some people don't have IDs, they don't have a driver's license, maybe they lost their employment and they need to get back into the workforce. Maybe they need to apply for Social Security benefits, which is a monstrous process. So the folks work with them on those things, but also they have physical and behavioral health needs. So folks need to get enrolled in Medicaid, they need to enroll in primary care, they need to get treatment and start their path of recovery from addiction. Those are all services that are offered on site. It would be 24/7 staffing, so there would be service providers staff there throughout the clock, working with folks. We would have on-site security, so not human services case managers, but a security company, making sure that the property is safe and that the residents are safe. I mentioned food, so food provision is a part of that work, and really planning, right? It's and community enrichment activities. You know, the Leland, who's been at the hotel many times, mentioned the kind of lovely breakfast area in one of our motel transitional housing programs. The participants do meet regularly in a community area. They share meals. They had, you know, Christmas and Thanksgiving in that lovely space, and do, you know, community enrichment activities. So I'll stop there. I could say more, but I want to save time for other questions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pose a couple of questions that I'm seeing about for how it's going to, from some of the local businesses, and then I'm going to, I see a couple of questions about funding. So Tran Nguyen operates one of the restaurants there in that parking lot. I have a business at the front of the hotel. If the homeless shelter is right there, it could affect the entire business center. How will this impact my income?
So I think that Adam talked about a fence, so that would be a part of the approach that we would take here. Is we would ensure that this programming is a little bit set off from the surrounding areas. It's secured by a fence. I mentioned there, we're providing, you know, pretty rich on-site direct services to folks. The intention here is to, and through our partnerships and, you know, this ongoing conversation with these neighbors about a good neighbor agreement with the partnerships with the DA and the sheriff's office, is to be sure that we get ahead of issues that have impacts on your businesses. We would like, you know, folks who are creating problems in the community because of their homelessness, the solution to those problems is to end their homelessness, right? And so that's the philosophy that's driving our investment in these kinds of programs. Once someone is in a program like this, a lot of the desperation, a lot of the really awful components of living without shelter are addressed. And so if someone is able to meet their basic needs, their hygiene needs, they have someone working with them that's helping them achieve their goals to move forward in life, then the kinds of behaviors and things that you're seeing when they have no hope, they have no resources, they can't clean themselves, those kinds of behaviors really get reduced. Bill, I see you just unmuted.
I keep going. I didn't want to interfere. I'm ready to go when you're done with your answer.
No,
I would say I see it in both a short term and a long term. Short term, we just need to be communicating to make sure that if you're seeing problems, we at the sheriff's office and the DA's office know about it, and we respond to those folks and hold people accountable when they break the law. But long term, the heat is exactly right. As opposed to just pushing folks on the street who are causing problems, this gives us a chance to get them off the streets so that we don't have those crimes. So we just need to stay together and make sure we're communicating about the short-term effects.
And I'll just say one more thing in general, and that is that, I mean, the county understands that small businesses, local businesses, including those around this hotel, are the economic engine of our community. And we can't survive as a community without the viability and profitability of those businesses. So under no circumstances do we want to create a situation where there's kind of a ring of economic death around this hotel. That is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to improve the livability and economic viability of our community by improving livability concerns, getting people off the streets, addressing public safety considerations, putting those people on a path to housing security to make, you know, to help them, because that's the right thing to do, but also to help ourselves, to help us, right? And the viability of our community at large. So the surrounding businesses and their interests is really, really important to us.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions here about funding. Would failing to utilize this opportunity have an impact on your ability to receive similar funding in the future? And Dr. Jeremy Seuss, a dentist in the area, is asking more questions about, are these, you said these funds are time limited, are they earmarked? Is it urgent? Can these funds be used for other purposes? Go ahead.
I can address that, Claire. Project Turnkey is earmarked for this specifically, and yes, the funding is time limited. We passed on Project Turnkey 1.0. This is Project Turnkey 2.0. We're one of the few counties in Oregon who does not have this project. Marion County has 3. Washington County has 2. They're going to add a third, because I talked to their chair this evening about it. Multnomah County has 4 or 5. I can't, but so I asked the chair of Washington County Commission how it was received in their communities. He says, well, one's in Forest Grove and one's in Hillsborough, and I'm not sure where the third is going to be. There's bidding going on, believe it or not, for the third project in Washington County because it was so successful. And there's a nonprofit actually bidding it along with Washington County. And yes, there were business owners, for instance, in Forest Grove, who were very concerned about it, just like the business owners here and in other areas. But once I said, well, what happened? You know, when people, the homeless started going in there, she says, we don't even notice that there's a homeless population there because they are housed, they're taken care of, they're on a continuum of care with being identified causation. I'm going to go back to causation, and I'm going to go back to accountability. They are held accountable, and they eventually do leave. This is not a permanent, I think maybe Vahid, you said 3 months going forward. So all the funds we have are for this process, for this purpose. Some is low income housing. I'm happy to see that there's some rent assistance going on. Clackamas County has done some rent assistance, and Vahid, maybe you can help the church with that too. But that's basically what it's for. It's really for the homeless going forward.
Thank you. This is an interesting question. Caitlin Day asks, what kind of outreach is the county doing to receive feedback from people who have experienced homelessness or are currently unhoused regarding this program?
Well, I mean, I think that is a great question, and I think that's something that we'd love to incorporate the experience of consumers of this program that we've operated in other parts of the county in the last couple of years as we look ahead to programming. You know, we also intend to, like Chair Smith did in this conversation with Chair Harrington in Washington County, you know, learn from our partners in the region and the state who have operated programs like this. You know, we do convene a body, a lived experience panel, a panel of people with lived experience of homelessness to help inform our policies and programs that we develop. You know, in the process of doing this property search, we have not solicited feedback specifically about, you know, our efforts to identify a property from people experiencing homelessness. But as we move into program design, I think that's a great question. And it's something that I would love to sit down with folks at one of our hotel programs and ask them about what's working and what's not working.
Thank you. I know we still have about 8 more questions so far that I see. I'm really sorry if we weren't able to get to everybody, or if, you know, one of the answers wasn't complete enough. We are always available to talk with you at any time and to set up additional meetings with you. I'm going to hand it back to CPO President Mike Sebula and to Chair Smith to close us out. Thank you.
Chair Smith, may I go first? So thank you. Thank you for all the panel tonight, for your information, for your compassion, for your knowledge and sharing it with us. It was interesting, it was challenging, and yet rewarding as well. For those that would like to learn more, please join our CPO. Please follow up the email that goes out. It would seem as if this will be an ongoing topic for the near future, and we want to be engaged with our community. There's also a question in chat about businesses and people in the community that didn't get weren't aware of the meeting. Share the link, share the web recording to this meeting, share information about how they can provide feedback, because we want their feedback. We need their feedback in order for this program to be successful. Claire, thank you for all of your work. Chair Smith, thank you.
I'd just like to say, for the questions that didn't get answered, we do intend on answering them. I read them all of them. They were very, very good. And I understand why you ask them. We have more recordings of meetings like this. This might be the 4th or 5th meeting like this that we have a link to, where people offered up similar questions and they were answered. And so going forward, we will be engaged with this. But as I will say, to do nothing about the homeless situation is not acceptable. A compassionate society, as we are, will learn how to deal with this problem head on. And for today, anyway, this is how we deal with it. Maybe 10 years from now, there's a different answer, but this is the problem that we're being dealt with today. And I want to thank all the participants and all the people listening. Please reach out. Thank you very much.